Hello, internet.
We are live.
We are live.
Again.
Are you, you good,
Just trying to get
mic-wise?
my mic position so
Okay.
I don't accidentally move my head out of the way by 2 centimeters.
And destroy
We
everything?
cannot hear you.
Yeah. How's it going? Thank you for coming. Today we are graced with an interview with composer Jason Graves. Thanks for coming, Jason.
My pleasure. I'm semi-live.
Yeah.
My
It's a
life.
long day. It's dinner time here, but I'm happy to be doing this.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. Where are you located right now?
North Carolina.
Oh,
Oh,
hot
NC.
damn. Okay.
NC. Go Tar
That's
Heels,
cool.
right? Oh, yeah.
Is that a thing?
The Tar Heels?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know sports.
Is this some kind of Death Stranding reference I'm not getting?
Yeah. So we're going to be playing one of my personal favorite games of all time, Dead Space 2, for many reasons, music included, sound design included, gameplay included, spookiness. I'm going to get Mario to play because he's never played it before. And we're just going to be asking some questions and hanging out. And let me switch over to that now. I really need to get hotkeys for this thing so I don't have to reach across all of our bodies.
Hotkeys. Can you do that in Steam?
Yeah, you can. Well, see, like these macro keys you can set to do stuff, but I can't. I don't. The razor thing won't work, and it hates me.
Oh, yeah.
So
Razor.
they don't like me. So all right. Yeah, that's fine. There you go. So again, thanks for being with us. So when did you start working in games? What was your first experience working in the game industry?
2001, I think. I did a game that actually came out in 2003 called King Arthur that was based on the film of the same name. And I did a couple of other games before that, but that was kind of the first one that, was like a legit release that wasn't a computer game or something like that.
Right.
So I started in 2001. It actually came out in 2003. So I guess it's been, wow, like 18 years.
Jeez. Don't you just hate thinking about time?
Yeah, yeah, I'm old. What are you going to do?
All right,
Fair.
let's see.
So I think I remember in doing some of the research for this stream, you worked on a bunch of like other forms of media as well, not just like games is what we know you for because we're nerds. So what is there anything that you like? Do you have a different process when you're working with games versus working with different forms of media?
Well, definitely. So I started on games in 2001, like I said, but I actually graduated from school in 1997. So there was like almost 5 years where I was doing, corporate music, or even radio spots, like recording audio and putting music in under radio spots, or recording bands, or doing anything like that. Anything that I could get my hands on audio wise, sound design as well, for
Awesome.
commercials and things.
Right.
But I went to school. So back then they didn't have game music, as a career in
career
school.
course.
It was just film and television. Right. So I was in USC in Los Angeles for film and TV music, and that was sort of kind of what I went to school for, and that's what I did in Los Angeles for a couple of years. And I got lots of commercials and television shows and a couple of films and stuff like that. I even did some commercials for Activision back in the day, like in 1997,
Oh, that's awesome.
which was really fun. But that's all like short. A commercial's 30 seconds long, and the guy I worked with in Los Angeles actually is the guy that wrote the Intel logo. You know, the Intel inside. Dun
Right.
dun dun dun.
Huh.
Yeah, he wrote that.
Somebody paid him for 3 notes. Or
That's
4 notes.
awesome.
Yeah, but see, it wasn't. See, that's the thing. It wasn't just 3 notes. It was like 200 permutations of those 3 notes.
Oh, yeah,
And then
it's-
every time they had an update, I was Pentium 3, I think, was 1997. So it was like dun 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 dun, ling, with the little 3 and the sparkles.
Yeah.
So we did like 200 versions just of that.
Oh my
and
God.
It was very monotonous.
Yeah.
And even commercials, working for ad agencies, doing the same commercial, like 20 different versions, and it wasn't, musically fulfilling.
Yeah.
So when I found games, go ahead.
All the like the QC that goes through, like going, in a commercial or for TV, or it's just like everything is micromanaged to like the nth degree.
Yep.
So
advertising is especially brutal. But I think I spent, like on a Honda commercial, maybe we spent like 7 weeks and did, me and my boss who wrote the Intel thing and one other guy. There were 3 of us. So literally we're writing 3 different commercials, 3 different pieces of music for this Honda commercial, probably every day. And we're on, number 60, and they ended up picking, number 42 or something. So spending 7 weeks on 30 seconds of music compared to writing, 2 minutes of music a day and spending 3 weeks on, 45 minutes of music for King Arthur, my first video game. And while, there's just like, this is probably my favorite opening of
I remember
any game that I scored.
Yeah, I remember playing Dead Space 1. I was like, this is spooky. And then I got Dead Space 2. And this is the first scene. It's like, oh, crap. This is insane. And you have
Run!
It says on the thing.
I'm trying to run.
It's L1.
I'm pressing it. No,
No,
that's
you're
not
running. You're running.
fast.
You're literally in a straitjacket. I love it. And you're dead.
You try to run without moving your arms.
You gotta go. You gotta go to the left side of that. Anyway, I forgot what we were talking about.
Video. How much the difference? Just for games, they're very long form. They're very kind of go with the flow, almost stream of conscious. At least that's the way I approach them. But it's still from a film sort of background. A lot of talk with interactive games, especially in Dead Space, is very interactive. You've got these different layers, and the bottom layer is always quiet, and the middle layer is always medium, and I like it being more dynamic, almost like film music that's done for a game. And this is a perfect example. I mean, this chase scene was one of the very first things that I did for Dead Space 2, and it's one of those things, you work on a sequel after the first one got such... That's cheating.
I've never played this, and I
first
really
one,
am not good
that's
at
fair
video
enough, fair
games.
enough.
On the first try, I will struggle.
I was really concerned that I wanted the music to be really, really good and like extra scary, especially for this opening. So
yeah, I mean, the first
it was kind of a proper mood.
Yeah, totally. Because that first swell, like you're getting saved, and then all of a sudden it's like that's like dissonant string swell that just happens real quick when the dude gets destroyed, and then he's in your face with his whole face falling apart. Like, at what point do you start to, like, I don't know, have to, because there's a point where it's like, okay, I'm making this for this thing that doesn't exist in real life, and that's really terrifying, but how do I convey that, like, if someone wasn't necessarily paying that much attention to the intro? You know what I mean?
It's a lot of times, especially with horror, it's all about the broad strokes. So you've got things going on between those big moments that sort of build up to it and give you that tension and anticipation, but it's all about really hitting, when that string swell that you mentioned, and then when his face kind of comes apart and he goes, "Wah!" That's obviously a big moment. When you start running and the music needs to kick in, and it's all about just being super obvious. Like, the more simple, the better.
There's not a lot of room for subtlety in horror games. Although there totally is, because when I was playing, I just contradicted myself, but when I was playing this the first time, I remember like walking through a certain corridor, and there would be like random, just like string, like quick bursts, like stabs of string notes, and I'm like, fuck, like I don't want to do this. I don't want to walk down this corridor right now.
They were really great about using the music to sort of prod the player and make them, worry before anything even really happened.
Right. So in your work in like advertising and working on the same thing for months at a time, or how do you get used to like stuff being left on the cutting room floor? So like I'm sure there was a bunch of things for Dead Space, over the course of all 3 games that you made that didn't end up getting put in the game. So how do you get used to that? Because I know a lot of like producers and musicians have a hard time when someone's like, "Oh, this doesn't work." Like, how do you deal with someone saying your baby is not good enough?
It's what I discovered, and this was really a good question because it was more from advertising, those iterations over and over and over. You kind of do the first one with all of your heart and you put your soul into it and you do the best job you can. And then after that, emotionally, in terms of, what's the word? Like emotional commitment, I kind of sever the ties. So if something needs to be tweaked, then it's all business.
Right.
And okay, well, why did they it's not scary enough, let's say, or it needs to be, it's not. Well, a feedback that I got a couple of times for Dead Space was, what did he say? It's not tense, it's scary. Like the music was too scary, and they needed it to be more tense. And it's like, okay, so I basically need to strip some things back to make it more tension and less, in your face,
Right.
kind of scary. It's just one of those. Yeah, it's hard to answer this question without seeming like I'm coming off as kind of making up how this works. But
Well,
most of the time, I have a pretty good track record in terms of kind of one and I'm done. Most of the time with games, there are hardly any corrections. Like I said, there were 2 tracks in the first Dead Space that were too scary. I think there was a boss in the second Dead Space, like right before Isaac gets his rig, that we'll probably get to.
yeah.
That was too slow. They wanted it to be a little faster. But it's usually general things like that. I try really hard to kind of nail the aspect and the emotions of the game before we start actually doing the music for the game. So a lot of times, that trial and error is done beforehand, either internally on my part or even with the developer, like with a music suite or something. So when we really have to do the music and the gameplay is cooking and stuff is due, then we're all already on the same page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Because if you like you said, you ask about what it needs to be before you actually start working, so you don't make a bunch of extraneous stuff.
Right.
So the and you mentioned like, saying it without sounding like you're making it up, but it's like, aren't we all like, especially in music production, aren't we all kind of just like, this works, this sounds good, let's go with this, I'm making this up as I go.
Yeah, that was me today doing some TV music. I had a guy that was an assistant with me for about 5 years when I first started working on the first Dead Space, because I had so much work to do, basically taking these recordings and building instruments out of them so I could write the music in the computer that you hear in the game, and he was helping me with that. And maybe 3 years into his stint with me, I said something like, he said, "How's it going?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know what game I was working on." Like, I don't know, man. I just feel like I'm making this up as I go along. He goes, "There's a word for that. It's called composing."
Yeah. Improvisation.
I was like,
Fair.
Yeah.
So when you're composing, what is your relationship with music theory like? Like, do you rely on it heavily? Or do you consider yourself like, I don't know, a theory guy?
I'm a theory.
If I'm doing horror, no, because it's like throw out all the rules and make it super crunchy. If I'm doing anything but horror, I am definitely a harmonic guy. Like, I'll come up with a chord progression before I'll come up with a melody, if that's the kind of question that you're asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty open-ended, but because a lot of the time, some of the people we've interviewed on here, like Phonetic Hero, we interviewed for what's the game, Warframe, and he was like, "No, I don't really do." I sort of understand theory, but I don't use it a lot. So it's like, And then we interviewed Gary Scheinman a couple weeks ago, and he was all like, "Oh yeah, I love 12 tone. Like I'm into all this like atonal shit." It's like, oh, okay, I wasn't ready.
Yeah, Gary and I are cut from the same cloth for sure. We actually met after the first BioShock came out,
Nice.
and became pretty good friends. We were walking down the sidewalk at GDC. I mean, 10 years ago or something. Like right when Dead Space and BioShock, like they were really, really popular.
Right.
And we had our name tags on, and a group of kids were walking by, and they sort of stopped, and they were like, "Gary Scheinman, Jason Graves, like, you did BioShock, but you did Dead Space," and you could just see their heads like exploding because they don't. It's just guys, right? That's all of the video game guys, especially the old school guys. We're all really good friends, and we talk about stuff and share things, and especially hang out at conventions and stuff. So yeah, Gary and I, that was a common nality that we had, was the whole kind of 20th century music and music theory and studying scores and orchestration and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny because everyone we've talked to has known each other in some fashion. Like we talked to Austin Wintry. We talked to Tom Salta and we talked to Austin Wintry within the month, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like I know Tom," and like, "Oh yeah, Austin's a cool guy." It's like, it seems like this industry is so big, but then at the same time, it's like everyone's friends with everyone, which is nice. And part of the thing we talked about with Gary was how, like, if you're working in the industry, it's not hard to get work if you're not an asshole. And we had a whole conversation about how, like, that's like one of the biggest aspects. Like, yeah, you know your stuff, and yeah, you're good at sound design and composition, but if you're easy to work with, like, that trumps everything else, really. Which is another thing we've noticed, that
because you really
interviewed has been the nice guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What were you gonna say?
I mean, when you're in the trenches and deadlines are looming, and a milestone's coming up and a bunch of stuff gets changed, and it's nice to know that the people you're working with, understand and they're cool about it. And of course they're professional and they can get everything done, but that personal connection really goes a long way. And that's just business 101 in general, right?
That's any
but
any
especially
industry
with games.
Yeah,
Totally.
So when you were working on Dead Space, I mean, since you worked on all three of them, when you were starting on Dead Space 1, how far along were they in the game itself when they brought you on? Was it like, did they have a tech demo? Did they have like just like concept art? Nothing.
I was brought in. Oh, I'm trying to remember now. I was brought in a year before there was a vertical slice. So vertical slice is just like a little 20-minute piece of gameplay that like everything works.
Right.
So there was no gameplay. There was like some concept art, and they had what was called, I can't remember what it was called. It was like a 2-minute montage of clips from movies with like a film piece underneath it to sort of convey the atmosphere of the game. That was really all they had.
Right.
And we actually iterated a little bit on the music. I think I did about 20 or 22 minutes of kind of more action-y music.
Uh-huh.
Like a little dissonant, but more like an action kind of thing, because
Right.
that's what they said that they wanted. And then they came back after about 6 months and said, "We're throwing all that out. Now we just want you to write the scariest music that anybody's ever heard, period."
Yeah, so I also realize I've noticed, and in doing the research, people have talked about how over the progression of Dead Space, like the first one, Isaac is silent. You're low on ammo all the time. There's limited amounts of guns. You get overwhelmed a lot. But then as it progresses, you can pick up their arms and shoot them at them too. Yeah, like the dead guys. Or just punch them. Nice. So that's one of my favorite things about this game is that it has a dedicated curb stomp button, which is just like hilarious to me. But so over the progression of the games, they got less horror-y and more action-y. Whereas like by the third game, you're basically like a military. The first one you're an engineer, you're not really combat trained, but by the third one you're basically a badass, killing people left and right, even if they're necromorphs or not, because they're part of the organization. But so did you have to adapt your music over the course of the 3 games? Like, did you have to change the style, kind of?
Most definitely. The first one, what I mentioned for direction, the scariest music ever written, that was pretty much the only direction that we had. and they gave me complete freedom, literally, to do whatever I wanted. And to have the interactive music the way we wanted to do it, we couldn't record with a live orchestra because the engine that's playing the music back right now is actually
R1.
playing. Where's my fingers? There we go. There's 4. There's 4 different layers of music all playing at the same time. It's just, if you're exploring, there's just the bottom layer, and then maybe a second layer will come in, and then eventually all 4 of them will turn on. But for every 2-minute piece of music I wrote, it was actually 8 minutes of music. So if we're doing, 2 hours for the score, that means we're actually recording 8 hours for the score, and there's no way that we could do that live.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even do like a demo of what the music would sound like because because I wanted to do this crazy aleatoric sound design, right? Necromorph, right? It's I wanted to make a musical necromorph. So take the orchestra and just like completely destroy it and do a musical necromorph for the score.
That's awesome.
But in order to do that, I had to record all the sounds beforehand.
Right.
And then cut them up and put them in the computer and play them from my keyboard and write the music that way.
Right. That's
So it was very backwards.
Yeah, it's kind of intensive too. So when you're composing in that kind of backwards, broken necromorph fashion, well, first off, what's your favorite? Like, what DAW do you use?
Then I was using Digital Performer.
Ooh. Yeah, you and Gary.
Yeah, that's another thing that we had in common.
What about now?
I switched to Cubase back when I started on Far Cry Primal.
Nice.
Just because I was having lots of problems with Digital Performer in terms of memory and things, and 64-bit versus 32 and all that. So I've been in Cubase or Nuendo ever since then.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I've only used the Nuendo Elegant version because it came with some software I got. But so in the process, like, what is it like composing in a I don't want to say like segmented way, but more loop-ish base? Because so in this game or any of the Dead Space games, when you're in combat, the music is different from when you're out of combat. It gets more intense. It changes. So how do you make it in
this space water, man?
How do you make it so that your music transitions into itself smoothly, or is that more done in like the middleware implementation sector?
That was my responsibility for sure. Um, a lot of times, so within those 4 layers of music, really only the combat layer was like really rhythmic, and a lot of times what I would do is I just write, and all the loops were 2 minutes long. So I just write a piece of music, let's say the combat music that's kind of moving and churning. I just write a 2-minute piece of music, and by the time I got around 2 minutes, I'd figure out a way to sort of wrap the music up so that it would jump back to the beginning and sound like it was kind of moving on to the next thing, as opposed to starting over again, if that makes sense. Kind of like a barber pole. Like it just kind of keeps going up. And then you'd have to go and cut it and edit it and take the digital audio file so that it would loop perfectly.
Right.
But that was the general idea. I think I ended up doing more like 2.5 minutes for most of them. But it was called a fear emitter.
Yeah, when we did the original
they-
research, that was so cool. That implementation was so cool. Sorry, continue. I just needed to vent a little bit.
No, it's totally fine. But that's the idea, is the layers of music are being turned up and down based on, let's say, a fear emitter on that necromorph. So maybe you were getting close to him, but you hadn't seen him yet, and the music starts getting louder, and then when you finally see him, a stinger will play, and then the combat music starts. But that whole kind of bit of gameplay maybe only lasts 15 seconds. So you've got all these layers moving back and forth during 15 seconds of the 2.5-minute loop. So a lot of times this 2-minute piece that I wrote that's actually 8 minutes of music will be playing in game for 20 minutes.
Right.
And you never really hear the same thing twice. It doesn't sound like a loop because it's constantly moving up and down and changing with your gameplay. And on top of that, we have random stingers that play. I think I did like 60 different stingers, and they just randomly will trigger a certain size stinger when something happens. And even if you die and you play it again, it'll play a different stinger. So it really keeps it evolving, and it keeps it from getting stale, which I think keeps it scary as well.
Yeah, it's I remember playing when we were doing research for this, I saw the thing about the fear emitters, and it's like, it doesn't seem like it seems like it should be obvious for a game like this, but the implementation is so cool. And it must have been really intense on, I mean, not only you, but like the middleware, the implementation programming and all that stuff. It must have been really intense in that situation, because it's like there's so many layers jumping in and out. If you kill one necromorph, but then 2 more show up, and then it like all these different fear emitters crossing over, it's really a cool system.
Yeah, it ended up working really well, and a big part of it was I had control over every piece, how the different layers would kind of fade in and fade out. So I could write it. I could write the combat track accordingly if I wanted it to stack on top of the other tracks, or if I wanted the other tracks to go away. There's always music playing. I mean, especially in the quieter parts of the game, if you just stop and listen, it might even sound like room tone, but it's just a lot of ambient, strings playing these very long kind of ambient spooky chords or brass swells. So it was very much a music as sound design kind of idea, and having the two of those blur together, I think, is one of the reasons that it seems so seamless.
So, did you have a lot, like, did you work on any of the sound design for this game as well, or was it a different team?
No, just the sound design team. There was like 3 guys, basically, that just worked all the time and did such amazing sounds. I mean, it's amazing sounds.
The sound in this is, no pun intended, very visceral. Like the all the flesh noises, and we're located in the Bay Area, and so like a lot of our students sometimes will do take recordings of Bart, And I was like, oh, funny story about that. The Bart recording, if you ever played Dead Space, is like that super scary sound that you hear. It's like, oh, it's really inspiring to people. And so when you're working with the sound design team, did you both have to did you work closely, or was it more just like, okay, here's my track, you guys do your thing, or was there a lot of consideration from both sides being like, working together?
We were everybody was head down, plowing through the deadlines. There wasn't a lot of time for a lot of cooperation or hand-holding. It would have been great if we could have done it, but it was just... And there was also no direction for the second one. On my point, I mean, even EA proper just said, yeah, just, do more of what you did for the first one. That's great. But I wanted to change it and kind of have it sound different, and they wanted to do the same thing with the sound design. So we were kind of evolving on Dead Space 2 in parallel paths, but not really knowing what each other was doing until it was in the game.
Nice. That's really cool because it still works really well together. And a lot of the game industry right now is, people talk about the crunches and the deadlines and how hard it is to get stuff out. But it's cool that it can still come together to make something so, immersive but also terrifying as Dead Space 2, or 1, 2, or 3, to be honest. I remember in this game the needle sequence when you have to put the needle in your eye. I remember the music in that part was, first I thought it was a cutscene, so I was like, oh, okay, it was a cutscene. You get in and then nothing happens. It's like, oh crap, I have to do this myself. And the music is so relaxed compared to the rest of it. It's like, oh, this is nice and horrible. Like, I'm gonna fucking stab myself in the eyeball now. So when you're working on a game like Dead Space versus the stuff that you've been doing with Supermassive, is it a different process there as well? Because the Supermassive games are very... It's basically like a pick-your-own-adventure movie more than it is, like a I don't know. I don't want to say it's not a game because it's very much still a game.
It's not a game.
Yeah, but it's like an interactive movie almost. And we played Until Dawn a while ago. Mario let Chris die.
Let Chris die.
So
no.
It was an accident.
So is there a different process for those two types of games? Like, do you? I mean, I'm sure just because they're both horror, but in different ways. Is it a different mindset kind of? Because I'm sure the process is different, but.
Absolutely, we're two completely different music engines. Like I was, ultimately responsible for building the music system in the first two Dead Spaces, and then the third one it just sort of got bigger. But I would write the tracks, and then the game would interactively mix those levels.
Wait, the fear emitter was your idea?
No.
Oh.
No, that was Don Vecca's idea.
I was gonna say
But the fear emitter, yeah. The fear emitter was driving the music level, so I was responsible for creating, 4 2-minute pieces of music that would sound good when they stacked together.
Right. Okay.
And the game was mixing it live. Right.
I see.
With Until Dawn, because you have all these choices and there's all these different things going on, and literally the plot could take a right turn and do something different.
Right.
Instead of just giving 4 stereo tracks of music, I sent stems, like individual instruments, sometimes up to 25 or 30 stems of, this is the violins, this is the alternate violins, here's the second alternate violins, here's the shaker part, here's the just and then Barney Pratt, who's the audio director, would throw it all in Pro Tools and then edit the music as a music editor in film would be to match with the gameplay. And he literally spent a year on that after I was completely finished, just editing and making stuff fit and taking something else and 2 different things from 2 different pieces and mashing them together and putting them underneath the gameplay. And I think, let's see, It was like 2.5 hours of score, and I think he said there was literally like 17 hours of continuous music that
Jeez.
he has in the game. Yeah.
Right. So was it similar for Man of Medan?
Yes.
Same process. Yeah.
And even more so. You know, I've done quite a few interactive scores now. So there's some ideas that I have every now and then. Like I won't even write a piece of music sometimes. We'll just take 2 minutes of music and call it like a suite or you know, one-off ideas. So it'll just be textures and gestures, and if you played it all together, it would sound like this horrible mishmash. But it's like maybe 15 or 20, you know, just different like ideas that can go different places. I mean, sometimes they just need a string that just sustains for like 10 seconds and then fades out.
Right.
You know, all these just little moments, because the game is just so layered. It has to be a really granular kind of delivery on my part, which is it's fun. It's just another way of writing the music.
So with the Supermassive stuff, how far along were those when they asked you to come on?
Oh, they were pretty far along.
Okay.
I could see, you know, at least the motion capture with the actors, and a lot of times the dialogue was roughed in. And then towards about halfway through the process, I could start seeing walkthroughs of the game. And Barney and I were very close in terms of, you know, what a specific piece of music needed to do.
Right.
He'd say, okay, this is when Sam's hiding in her bath towel and she's under the bed and she can either do this or that. So, you know, we need part of the music needs to be really fast and the other part of the music needs to be really quiet and tense. And, you know, it was kind of spelled out.
Right.
Honestly, the biggest challenge with the Supermassive stuff was making the soundtrack. Because
Really?
I had, you know, like just all this going on, and then I had to basically extrapolate it into some sort of a musical journey that followed the game. So I think it was like a couple of weeks of me just going in and editing stuff to build the music to sound the way it did.
That's so
and the underscore of the game. But that was also really fun.
Right. Well, that's good at least. And so, what about for Moss? Was that your most recent project? Game project?
Yeah, I mean, Man of Medan obviously came out a couple of months ago, but Moss and the little Twilight Garden expansion they did, that's a great question, because I think maybe it's because I've been doing a lot of television for the last couple of years,
right?
And some trailer music and stuff like that. Have you seen Moss? Have you played it at all?
I've watched a bunch of playthroughs of Moss. I haven't played it myself yet.
Okay.
It's
a very.
I'm broke.
You know, it's like a very relaxing sort of experience. It's kind of like, you know, the halfway point between the music for Dead Space and the music for Until Dawn, where Dead Space was very linear and long and Until Dawn was very segmented.
Right.
I don't mean in terms of the genre, just the way the music was put together. So for Moss, at the very beginning, I was working with Steven, the audio director, who's just amazing. And for like a vertical slice or something, they wanted like a couple of stingers and a couple little loops and things like that. And I was just getting started. I said, sure, let's see how we could make it work.
Right.
And they gave me the gameplay. And we know what the music was going to sound like. It was just how it was going to be implemented. So that was done. And maybe it was for an E3 preview or something like that. And I saw it. And it just seemed a little Mickey Mouse, like a little, you know, now the music starts.
Right.
And now there's a stinger.
Right.
And now we're going to this. So I suggested to Steven that I do something a little more long form and do like a 5 to 8 minute kind of just piece of music that I called a suite. But, you know, if there's music that he needs for a level that goes from the swamp to a forest and then the sun's coming up at the end, you know, I write an 8 minute piece of music that sort of does that.
Right.
And I said, we could just try it, right? And I'll give you all the stems So it's kind of long form like the Dead Space music was, but it's also being granularly exported the way the Until Dawn music was.
That's
And
interesting.
I would send, 20 or 25 stems. And since he had all the individual stems, he really had a lot of control over which pieces went where and where the music would change. And that's how we ended up doing the whole game.
Nice.
So if you have heard any of the music on the soundtrack of Moss, that's actually the pieces of music that I sent to Polyarch to put in the game. They just sort of, picked them apart and then reassembled them so that the game could play them back
Right.
according to what was going on. But even then, it's a very languid kind of, you can sit and look at things and you want to look around, and it's not a stop and go kind of game. Oh, I love this part.
Yeah, this part is awesome.
Oh shit.
It's a really Moss, from what I've seen, is a really pretty game.
It's beautiful.
Shoot it. There you go. Yeah, I've been meaning to get it because I really like the art style, and then I saw that you composed for it, and I was like, oh, I really want to play it. Because it's I don't really have much experience with your work besides this and the Supermassive games, and those are both like very horror oriented. So it was really interesting to me to like something different. Because we were talking.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. When we were talking to Mikko Tarmia, the guy that did Amnesia and Soma, we were talking about how it's like you can get shoehorned really easily into being like, you are a horror composer. Do you ever feel that you're like typecast as a horror composer?
Well, I would assume that the games that I scored that got the most attention are scary games, and then my last name is Graves.
I was gonna say with a last name
those
like
two
yours.
things together, it's kind of like a lot of people think that it's a stage name, that I made it up or something, but that's my name, that's my family. My parents' last name was Graves, my brother's last name was Graves. But yeah, definitely. I think there's an expectation, that people sort of hear something in their head. It's funny because the audio director, so Stephen Hody, the audio director for Moss, called my agent, who represents a lot of composers, just because they needed music, but they weren't exactly sure who they wanted. So they were going to ask for some people to submit like examples. So he's describing the game and he's talking about all these little animals and everything. And she says, "Oh, I know, I have the perfect composer for you. You should hire Jason Graves." And he literally laughed and said, "Oh, no, it's not that kind of a game." Because again, he associated, Until Dawn and Dead Space and, Devil May Cry and even Far Cry Primal. I mean, it's a lot of these textural, dark,
Gritty
kinds of games, which actually is not. It's not the kind of music that I would write. Dead Space was the first scary game I'd ever done, and I kind of had to do a bunch of research and figure out how to make it work. But Moss, on the other hand, is the kind of stuff that I love. I love to listen to, but I especially love to write, and I just never really had the chance until now. So thank goodness that Polyarch, rolled the dice with me.
Yeah, you never really think of like someone's name being an issue for getting them a job unless your name's something vulgar. But when I first was looking up people to interview, I was like, oh, Jason Graves, like this dude sounds like a action hero.
I know I've had literally people have told me it's the rig upgrade. I remember writing this piece. It was a big deal. And then the boss that you're getting ready to fight was the cue that needed to be. Actually, now that I'm seeing it, they wanted it a little slower. They wanted it to be more like big and plodding, so I slowed it down a little bit.
The boss fight or the rig upgrade?
The boss fight.
I see. Yeah, because I remember like after playing Dead Space 1, and then I think I replayed Dead Space 1 before I played Dead Space 2, and then playing Dead Space 2, it's like, oh, Isaac doesn't have his suit on. This is so cool. He's talking. He's like more fleshed out. And then you get the rig, and it's this big, like, dramatic, dun-dun-dun-dun, like, you know, epic music. Then the rig gets on, like, comes on you all kind of slow, like, and modular. And then it, like, closes, and it's that iconic, you know, face mask where it's like, oh, yes, this is so awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was super cool. A lot of this game, for Dead Space 2, I actually scored chronologically, which was really nice to kind of
Like, along
start
with the
from
game?
that opening corridor and work my way through, because that's just how they ended up making it. They ended up making it chronologically.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I feel like that's not usually the case, because when I was looking at I was listening to some of the stuff you did for Far Cry Primal, and it's like it all sounds very like Dead Space. You can kind of hear the linear progression, whereas Primal is it definitely sounds more primal, but it also doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like necessarily I don't want to say an album, because it's different than composing an album, obviously, but like the progression of the music works differently, it feels like, than it does with something like Dead Space.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Primal was like the music was all based on where you were on the map, because there were these 3 different tribes. So
Right.
depending on whose territory you were in, that was how the music was determined to play back. So we had all these different instruments and vocalists and things that I would use for each piece. So they sound different, but even on the album especially, everything's just sort of stacked to make a musical experience.
Right.
There's really no beginning, middle, and end.
Right. And then I feel like it's funny because when you were saying like the Supergiant games.
Oh, this is so cool. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, this was the very first thing that I saw from Dead Space 2. They were working on a lot of stuff from the beginning at the same time, and I did score it chronologically. But the first time I visited EA for Dead Space 2, this was kind of the first thing that had come online, and this whole sequence coming up.
Get out of the corner! Why are you in the corner?
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing!
No!
Wow, that's a good bug. That's a really good glitch.
Literally unplayable.
You're dead. Oh, you're not dead.
Just keep shooting.
You have health packs, maybe? Nope, you're fine. Anyway, so this boss fight, I didn't realize until now that it's made of like multiple people all squished together into a monster. That was because in the first one, the necromorphs are kind of, they're either one person or they're like the big tentacles and like amorphous things, whereas in this it's like, oh,
Right.
this is like 30 odd people mushed together into some horrifying monstrosity. And I remember the ads for this game being like, moms hate Dead Space. Like showing people's actual moms reacting to like the monsters and stuff. It was so, I don't know, so early 2000s edgy. It was great.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was a big deal. I mean, definitely. I feel like with the first one, I had no idea what I was doing, and I was terrified the entire time, and never had enough time to work on it. And with the second one, it was sort of like, okay, let's figure out what I can do better, based on what I learned from the first one. And
Right.
Definitely, it's one of my. I don't put it on in the car and listen to it while I'm driving around, but it's definitely one of my, more proud moments. If you were to say, what are you really proud of? Dead Space 2 is definitely at the top of the list.
Nice. Yeah, it's not something you put on when you're driving your daughter to school.
No, definitely not.
So I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the the boss fight. I forgot how terrifying this part is. I was watching one of the Ars Technica interviews where they were talking about how the
Son of a bitch!
Jesus, that thing was angry.
got him. Where they were
Nice.
talking about the tentacle scene in the first one.
Yeah.
That like returns in this one. So is there a lot of like thematic, because I didn't have a lot of time to like necessarily study the musical themes in the games, but because we have normal work to do. But like, were there like recurring musical themes that you would use throughout the series?
There was nothing in the first one thematic at all. I mean, I guess there was Nicole's theme in the first one, but it was more kind of at the beginning and at the end.
Right.
For the second one, however, I wanted to have something. There were two themes. So I had a theme for Isaac, and then I had a theme kind of for the necromorphs. And the necromorphs theme was really simple. It was just 4 descending chromatic notes. It would kind of just go bum 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 bum.
Right.
Just 4 descending notes, and you'll hear it throughout the score.
That's very
I
familiar.
figured it's like super simple. Isaac's theme, I did ba-na-na-na.
Okay.
Probably at that pitch, I'm not exactly sure, but it literally is D-E-A-D.
Oh, wow.
Dead.
Wow, that's awesome.
I mean, technically it's D flat, E natural, A flat, D natural, but I did that on purpose. I wanted the D-E-A-D, ba 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 ba, and the da 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 da. So there's kind of 4 notes that work with each other, but also work against each other, and that's about as thematic as I was able to get.
Were people aware of that when you were doing it, or did you just kind of sneak it in there?
I think the audio director knew, but most people, I mean, it is like you get da 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 da. I mean, it's just like throughout the whole score. Whenever it plays, it's those same 4 notes. But unless you're a musician and you pick it out on the keyboard, and even if you pick it out, you could spell it a different way. Oh, C sharp, E, G sharp, D.
Right.
It only works if you see it. And even the musicians that played it, the string quartet that I recorded, it was spelled that way. And after the session, I was like, "Did you notice anything, about the music?" He was like, "Oh, I like that 4-note motif." I was like, "Well, it spells D-E-A-D," and they were like, "Oh, stuff like that." I mean, it's more of an inside joke. I'm not doing it for the general audience to get it. It's more of just a wink. It's a fun way of coming up with an idea.
Well, that's really cool because you were talking about turn around, go to the bench. There's a when you were talking about advertising earlier, like the Intel thing, but like the ABC theme is literally the notes ABC. It's just those 3 notes, and so like I didn't expect something like that to pop up in Dead Space, but that's awesome. Did those themes carry over to the third one, or was that just in this one?
That was just in the second one.
Okay.
Because of the plot and the story and everything else. I don't know. The third one was a bit of a Frankenstein's monster in terms of the production, the development, everything. I mean, we had 2 different audio directors. Half the game I did, there was no audio director. It was like me and the sound designer, the lead sound designer, just making stuff up. It was a little crazy. I think EA wanted it to be bigger than it was. The first one, I don't remember any of the numbers, but they had, they wanted to sell 50 copies, let's say, and it ended up selling like 80 copies. Like it sold a lot more than they wanted. They're like, great. So for the second one, we want to sell 100 copies, and it ended up selling, 150 copies, so it was even more. And the third one, they wanted to sell something like, 10,000 copies. It just went astronomically higher. And then marketing is like, oh, well, if we want to appeal to more people, it needs to be more like Call of Duty. It needs to be more like an action-adventure thing, which really killed me because I was going to go back to the first Dead Space and then just make it like the craziest, scariest, like just most insane score that you've ever heard. I thought they were going to do something, like really, really scary, and they went the exact opposite direction. And I mean, I have no control over that, so I just had to sort of follow their lead.
Nice. Yeah, and like, not to, I don't know, rag on anyone, but like I remember after this came out, and Visceral shut down, I was upset with EA because I was like, this was such a great series, like, you know, and then they turned it into, you know, action shooter with Carver, and like co-op was a great idea, but then making it so that it's basically you're like invincible. It's like not scary anymore by the third one. There's still like some of the body horror gore aspect, but it was like, my favorite part about 2 was how much of 1 it built on, because in 1, you know, 1 was scary, 1 was like lots of, no pun intended, lots of space, very like lonesome, and you know, you feel like very alone. And then 2 is that lots of, you know, there's more people, but they're all getting like, it's really gory and fucked up. And then you know, there's callbacks to the first game. You don't feel as helpless, but it's still like there's a lot of jump scares and terrifying stuff going on. But then 3 was just like, it was very Call of Duty-ish. It's like, you know, okay, here's the gun, go shoot the bad guy. I don't know. It kind of lost it for me, but you know, I still played the hell out of it.
Yeah, it's almost like you know, it's almost like Justice League, right?
Man.
Justice League was so dark,
Right.
and then they got another director to come back and do reshoots, and sort of there's these like obvious places where kind of levity was thrown in, like in the middle, and it makes this really kind of broken feeling of a film. That's very much how the third one was sort of put together. We did about half the game in kind of that darker tone, and then the last half of the game, not chronologically speaking, the last half of the development of the game was like Call of Duty. So then you've got kind of this amalgamation that just I don't think didn't work, and you know, then they canceled the series, and what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it sucks because Visceral got, you know, this was like their whole thing, and you know, they did it really well. This is a, you know, I don't know that it's old enough to call it a quote cult classic, but I think it's like a modern classic. Like, you know, this game is, so many people love this game and what it does.
Heads off.
But you know, not to rag on EA too much. Apparently, Jedi Fallen Order is pretty good, so
Everybody loves it.
everyone loves it.
Yeah, I've heard it's great too.
Yeah. So are you a big gamer yourself?
If I had time, I would be. I'm playing a lot of Pokemon Sword and Shield right now, like vicariously through my kids.
Oh.
I think we played for like 5 hours yesterday, and
Nice.
meaning that I sat there while they played.
Right.
And I watched.
No backseat
But,
gaming?
No, it's definitely. I mean, you know, some commentary from me for sure, but either I have a dev kit and I'm playing something that I'm working on, or I'm just
Go out and shoot this guy.
working all day, and in my time off, I'm just not. There's no time for gaming.
Right.
It's literally, it's that meme that showed like the
Ah, it's
girl
the other
looking
side
out the
now.
window
What the
with
hell?
the rain, and she says like, it says like, want to play games, ... too busy making games. That's essentially my life.
You're living the meme.
Yeah, I am. I'm a living meme.
It's cool. So are we. Like teaching music production, have no time to actually do music production.
Right.
I
Yeah,
like that
exactly.
This gave me the okie doke like this. He came out of this door. I was like aiming at that side. He jumped out the other side. It's like, oh man.
I think
Game pulled a fast one on
you got.
I got. I don't want to go back there. Let's just finish this story.
I'm really happy I made you play this, considering this. So, but what about like growing up? Did you have, you know, did you have a favorite series, or like what was your, you know, your first system? Was gaming a big part of your life growing up, or did
Well, it was, but I'm super old. So
I was gonna say,
mean,
is this
literally
asking
I'm
too
one of those
much?
people that's gonna. I'm gonna talk about the Atari 2600 because that's what I grew up on. That was me in middle school, right? Was the Atari 2600, and then ColecoVision, which was a huge deal. It was like all of the arcade games, you know, Defender and Pac-Man and
Right.
Mousetrap and all these fun things. I played that all the time.
That's not so bad. At least it's not like the
then-
Fairchild.
Okay, well, that's true. By the time I hit high school, I started getting more into music, so it sort of went like games started going down and music started going up. So instead of spending my time playing games, I was practicing because I was doing piano and guitar and drums and percussion and all this stuff. And pretty much, I guess I came full circle once I got out of college because I started doing music for games. So I was
Right.
able to like mash them together.
That's that's the dream for all us nerds. Music and gaming nerds.
Oh yeah, totally.
So I actually recently got a 2600, like the Darth Vader unit, and it's
Oh, nice.
a lot harder to connect to a modern TV than I wish it was, because you have to get those like RF
kinda like
adapters to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. The little
It has to be on channel 3. It only works
Channel
on the
3,
CRTs.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yep. That's crazy.
Well, now it's like, you know, the retro is, well, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I like the retro stuff a lot. I'm kind of collecting consoles at the moment, but I just got a new television, and it's like I can't use it right now, basically. But if you know, when you're not working, is there like modern games that you like to, not necessarily, you know, like use as a basis, but like, you know, reference, you know, how there's reference tracks in your mastering? Are there like reference games for you?
No way.
Okay.
No,
checking.
I avoid stuff like that like the plague. The same way I avoid listening to film music a lot now. I used to listen to it all the time, like, you know, 15 years ago,
Right.
and was kind of, you know, would be influenced by like the push and pull of the film music and like how it would start and stop, how it would build up to something.
Right.
But I think it's probably just one of those things, you know, once I kind of hit 30, I started looking more inward for writing music rather than externally to
Yeah.
kind of be influenced by things. And that
Okay.
wasn't a conscious
you.
choice. It wasn't like I'm my own composer or anything like that. I just prefer to learn things on my own. And now I do. Last year, well, I did play Moss because I think it's an amazing game. But
Right.
I played a lot of Horizon Zero Dawn because I love Joris and what he did for that. And I also played God of War because I thought Bear did a really cool job with that score. And then what was the other one that we were doing? A Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh,
So,
nice.
you know, it's fun to play it and appreciate the music, you know, knowing the composers and knowing the audio teams that worked on it and all that kind of stuff. But it's not an influence at all. If anything, it influences me to do the exact opposite because I want to, you know, be constantly innovating on my own and trying new things.
That's awesome. Yeah, we actually reached out to we reached out to both Bear, Mercury, and to what's his name from Horizon?
Joris.
Yeah. Bear.
Joris de Man, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. Bear has not gotten back to us. Joris did, and then we haven't heard from him. But hopefully we'll be able to talk to them soon because we asked Gary if he could put us in contact with them. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, the God of War, my body. The God of War soundtrack was like, it was, you know, I haven't finished the game, but it was so fun and like not necessarily interactive, but it was very unique, I guess. I'm not entirely sure how I want to phrase that.
Yeah. The guys at Sony, I worked on them with a game called The Order about
Oh,
3
1886.
years before. Yeah. They're probably, I mean, I think I've worked with every publisher one way or the other over the last like 19 years. And the Sony music team, hands down, they've got it going on. Because they have these dedicated suites for audio, right? And they'll do just the audio or just the music for a game that Sony's publishing, when the developer, maybe doesn't have the resources financially or physically to hire a composer or to record Foley, and they'll do just audio stuff. And The Order was the first game I'd ever worked on where literally they were just like, so what do you want to do for the music? Like, well, I'd like to do this and this and this. Well, where do you want to record? Well, I want to record at Abbey Road. Okay, well, we'll do that. I was like, but I don't want to record in the big room. I want to record in the small room. Okay, sure. And I don't want to do it all at once. I need to split it up because, we got to do some tests and record half the music in February and then do the other half in May. I'm like, okay, sure. Everything. I mean,
That's
I think we
so
had like
cool.
almost 2 weeks at Abbey Road. We recorded everything live, and it was crazy. They mean business. Like, they put their money where their mouth is, for
Yeah.
sure.
For sure. That sounds like it sounds like
sure.
you're just getting everything comped on a vacation.
Yeah.
Just can we use the gym for free? Yeah.
Yes.
Room service? It's free. Damn.
Yeah, they're serious.
The what was I gonna say? The Sony I forgot. Oh yeah, the have you recorded at like Skywalker and all those?
Yeah, I think I've been to Skywalker probably 10 or 12 times.
Oh jeez,
Maybe.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's actually like
Well, just for Dead Space alone, I think I was there like 4 times between all of the Dead Space games.
Right.
so you guys utilize multiple locations or multiple studios to kind of record things for this? Is it based on, I guess, kind of proximity, like are you traveling along the development cycle, or is it just kind of like this studio has the gear we need, so we're going to record things here? How does that work exactly?
Most of the time, if I'm the only composer on the job, the audio director comes to me and they'll say, here's our budget. We do or we do not want to record live, and then kind of based on how much money they have to spend, they'll ask me to kind of figure out where the best place to record would be, because there's a lot of great places you can record.
Right.
With Dead Space, the first one, we had 3 recording sessions, and the first one was in Seattle, because that really was the only place I had recorded up until then. So we kind of did a test recording in Seattle. And then based on that, it was like very small budget, just a day of recording, just tests. And everyone seemed to like it. So after that, we sort of brought out the big guns and we went to Skywalker for the last 2 sessions.
That's awesome.
And of course, that's close to San Francisco.
It's right by us.
And then for Dead Space 2, I went back to Skywalker for 2 or 3 sessions, I think. And then for Dead Space 3, it was a different audio director. He wanted to go to Abbey Road, so we recorded at Abbey Road for that one. Pretty much Skywalker, Abbey Road, or Nashville has a really great recording studio. I think I've been to Nashville 7 or 8 times.
I hear
and
about
recorded
Nashville.
stuff there.
Yeah, Nashville gets a lot of good stuff going on with studios.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
it's really nice, and it's a direct flight for me. It's like a 50-minute direct flight, so that's definitely a plus.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I recorded Until Dawn in Nashville over 3 different recording sessions.
Nice. So how long have you been playing music yourself? Like not composing for an orchestra or...
My mom has a picture of me in the late 70s wearing these big giant 70s olive green headphones, like banging on the piano, like pretending to play. I took piano lessons when I was real young, but really in middle school is when I started. I was playing piano and I was learning to play drums.
Hey.
And so that's probably where it all began, middle school. Not like when I was 3, like some of these other guys. Whoa, some of these other guys have. I was born with a violin in my hand.
Yeah.
Right. Oh man, now I see why you're at where you're at. Yeah, that's cool. It's kind of like a humble beginning.
This one has clothes on.
This dude has clothes on and needs to stay.
God, bring it. Thank God I got that healing item.
So dark. Someone turn on the light.
Yeah, right?
I know, the flashlight is not enough.
Light in here.
They're conserving power.
No, you need
I'm
reload.
good. Okay.
Reload head.
Cool. Here you go. Oh God. No, 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 no.
Never take your eye off the enemy. We're safe now.
Nice try.
Anyway, I had a follow-up question, but it was murdered out of my mind by that necromorph. Crap. It was a good one too.
Break glass in this?
Yeah, man, destructible environment. Shit.
Actually, like, that's one thing I'm surprised more games don't do a lot is like
Destructible environments. I wish that was a thing more often.
It's pretty pogged.
So are there any trends in gaming that you've noticed since you've started, in game composition? I mean, since you started working as a composer, that are becoming
Tropish.
Yeah.
Oh well, so the first, let's see, what was I did, it wasn't even a DS, what was it? It was like, not a GameCube, it was, what's like the super early handheld stuff that was still like bleeps and bloops?
The Game Boy?
Like back in the Game Boy! Yes,
yeah.
thank you. So I did some Game Boy games, like a Star Wars Game Boy game where I had to take John Williams' like action music
man.
from the end of the first Star Wars and
8-bit.
distill it down to literally 2 sine waves and a white noise generator.
Oh my god.
Like,
That's like the guy who has to mix Hans Zimmer's like scores for the movies. It's just like, I'm gonna just turn all of this down. Damn.
I've got 790 stems.
Yeah. Whoa.
So I think probably, well, at least what I'm trying to get away from, and Moss is a good example, is I'm trying to get away from, there was a game that I did called Flushed Away.
Oh, yeah.
It was based on the film. I did a lot of film-based games back
Right.
in the day. And they had something ridiculous, like budget for 20 minutes of music.
Whoa.
Back
What?
then especially, film-based games were especially horrible. Because
Yes.
they were always chasing the release date of the film, right? And they had to base the game on the film.
Yeah.
So there was not a lot of time to do it, and maybe 20 minutes of music, and all the pieces they asked for were 30-second loops because they didn't have enough music budget to, they needed 90 minutes of music.
Right.
So instead of having 2-minute loops, they just asked for 30-second loops, and I ended up writing more like 50 or 60-second loops. But it was still early in my career, and I was super excited when the game came out, and I remember playing it, and you're in the kitchen trying to figure out whatever, and you want to get to the other room, and they just had this one, like 55-second loop that would have been 30 if I had followed their instructions, but this 55-second loop playing for like 9 minutes the whole time, and I'm like, oh yes! Now I'm going into the next room, and the screen goes dark, and it loads, and then the same piece of music starts playing again, and you just feel like, I don't feel like I've gone anywhere. Like, what did I just achieve?
Yeah.
The room looks different, but the music sounds exactly the same. So I always tried really hard to get as much music in the game as possible. That was just from the beginning, out of painful experience of me playing my own projects that I've worked on. But now especially, I'm trying to do less of the stop and go, less of the super close interaction. Like Tomb Raider is a perfect example. I played, or at least, I'd never played Tomb Raider.
Like the
I'd seen
originals?
videos of Tomb Raider gameplay, yeah. And she's walking around and there's no music. And she walks inside a room and literally crosses the threshold of the room and like action music starts, right?
Right.
And like in my head, I'm kind of looking around the room like, I guess someone's, oh, there they are! And they start attacking her.
Right.
So
The boss
I
fight
wanted the music to be more reactive and less predictive, which is why the Tomb Raider score, I mean, it was like 3.5 hours of music, and I think they only asked for 90 minutes, but it kept going to where I felt like the game was really special and it needed to have the music work a certain way. So I became really involved with the implementation, and the audio director and I, well, the music editor and I, Alex Wilmer, worked really close together to get the music working just right in that game. And
Nice.
that's sort of been my passion kind of since Tomb Raider, was to be as involved in the implementation as possible, which by extension means getting rid of those like short loops, like win stingers, lose stingers, you know, anything like that. I mean, if it's Pokemon, then it's perfect.
Right.
But if you're talking about an interactive, you know, kind of linear storytelling experience, like Tomb Raider or like Moss or even Until Dawn, you know, we don't want it to sound like a game in terms of the way the music loops, and when you get an end stinger and the music suddenly starts up again. You know, I kind of want it to be more of an immersive kind of experience.
So it's not, yeah, when it's less like RPG-ish, you know, you're taking your time going through menus and like having to have loops where you know, you're doing the same thing over and over, and you can take as much time as you want doing something. Whereas in, you know, Dead Space or Tomb Raider, it's more, okay, yeah, go, like, you know, you're waiting on your story, you're moving now. Oh god, sorry. There we go. Tell me that was it. Yeah.
Finally.
So the are you more involved in like the middleware usage then?
It depends. Some games I've done some Wise implementation and
Nice.
stuff like that.
Whoa,
Other
Wise.
games, there's not enough time, and it's just like, you know, get it in the game as quickly as possible.
Right.
A lot of times I try to be involved as early as I can, but you know, I don't have any control over that.
Right.
With Moss, I was involved very, very early, which was great. So we were able to work out how the music works. I think a lot of companies think, well, our game, we don't know what our game is yet, so we can't hire a composer, because what will the composer do?
Right. Yeah, if you have nothing to go on.
I think maybe, yeah, and that might be something that's sort of a little more popular now, is hiring the composer based on either the demo they've submitted or previous games that they've worked on, and just kind of expecting the music to sound like the way a previous game sounded, as opposed to partnering with someone and sort of coming up with a sound, coming up with an idea for the music. That's what I did with Moss and Tomb Raider. That's what I do for most of my games. Far Cry Primal, The Order, it was all very give and take, you know, based on the game, based on what I suggest, based on what we all think is going to sound good, as opposed to having to have the final idea for the music done before you've even seen the game, and writing a piece of music to demo for it, and then you know, maybe someone has some questions because, yeah, it's not finished yet.
Right.
Thank goodness for stasis.
Right? It's like the panic button. No, my God, it's too fast.
So what was I gonna say?
I kind of have a follow-up question to what you were talking about, the kind of getting involved with the audio editing and the middleware. Do you find that kind of maybe offers you a leg up, I guess, in a sense? Like, people are...
This was the corridor. This was the corridor that fucking made me like stop playing for a little while. I was so afraid. Wait. So sorry. What were you saying?
God.
Oh!
You're probably a little too. All right. I think you're safe. So
mashing.
wait, what were you saying? I forgot what you were talking about.
I was asking, do you find that maybe can help you potentially get more jobs? Like, oh, Jason's going to be able to be involved in more of the kind of middleware process as a composer, as opposed to someone who just comes in and does the music. I guess for our
That sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess for aspiring.
I think most of the time, companies are trying to get the right music, the right tone, you know, the right kinds of emotions for their game, and then there seems to be pretty black and white divide between composers versus a sound designer or someone who would maybe be editing the music or implementing it. But again, I think that's more of an old school kind of way of thinking. I know Jesper is very much into interactive stuff and how his layers work together and stuff like that. Gary, not so much. I'm sorry. So Jesper Kid, very savvy with the implementation. Gary is happy to let the developer kind of work that out. At least, when I was talking to him about it a couple of years ago. I'm not saying he's not interested in it or anything, but he comes from a different mental point.
Right.
I know Tom Salta is very tech savvy.
Yes.
And he's like, he's super into programming and how all that stuff kind of works. So everyone's a little different, but I think for the most part, when a game company looks at the older guys like Jack Wall and Tom and me and Gary and Jesper, Chris Valesco, they see a composer. They see someone who's going to write a score for them. And if they're a smaller company and they're looking to hire maybe an audio director that does a little bit of everything, then they're kind of saying, well, maybe they could implement the music, they could also write some music, and maybe they could do some sound design. And smaller budgets, one person has to do more things. When you start getting bigger budgets, people expect you to be more specialized. I think that's a good way of summarizing it.
Yeah, it's when we were talking to Tom and Gary, we asked, it's a pretty common question that we ask all the interviewees is like, how do you feel about middleware? Are you comfortable? Do you use it? All that kind of stuff, because it's it's so ingrained in the necessity of the game that like it's sometimes a plus, but like you were saying, it when you're hiring a big name like like you or Tom or Gary, that it's you're like you said, you're hiring a composer. But then when we interviewed like Austin Wintory or what was his name? I'm blanking. Darren Korb from Supergiant. He, Darren does all the audio for the Supergiant games. Like he did all the audio for Bastion and Transistor and everything. And so his situation's a little different because he was like best friends with the owners of Supergiant growing up. So they're just like, you do music, you're doing our music.
Right.
And he was tapped to do more than just the composition because they were smaller budget, but even now that they're Supergiant is, I wouldn't say they're big budget necessarily, but they're like definitely a bigger company now. And he still does all the music, and he just performed a set of his music at Day of the Devs a couple weeks ago, and it was one of our interns said it was amazing. So it's really cool.
Yeah, Darren is a super cool dude. I love his music, and I love his work in general, the way he works on the sound design and implements it and gets to use it with the music. And that's sort of a best of scenario, right? Because they give him the latitude and the time and the resources that he needs in order to be able to do that. It's not like you said, we don't have the budget, you're going to have to do everything, right, and you're already behind schedule.
Right. Yeah. And the crunch is a big problem with most game development at the moment, but
are you kidding me?
With the Supergiant games, like with Hades, they released like a beta, and then it's like, okay, so you're satiated, this exists, but now we have time to actually make it perfect, kind of. Which is I feel like that's a more respectful way of doing it, I guess, because hearing all of the horror stories about Red Dead and all that stuff about how the Rockstar employees were crunching like super hard on that it's kind of disheartening, I guess. But that's also more of the coding end.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even think about it, because if I visit Tomb Raider, let's say, I'm visiting the team working on the game.
Right.
They've been working on this game for a year and a half, and then we work on it for about another 2 years together to get everything finished. So
Right.
you've got about a 3.5 year period where all they've done is worked on Tomb Raider. Now in that 3.5 year period, I've probably done, 10 or 12 games total.
Right.
So when I come and visit them, one of the first things a lot of the developers always say is like, okay, so this is what we're doing for the implementation for the audio. Like, do you have any suggestions, or have you learned any tricks, or like, how are other people doing it? Like in the XYZ game, was the music done this way or was it done that way? Because there's a very closed off sort of experience when you're just working on one game. And I've never really known what that's like, because I always have multiple games, and that has its ups and downs. I mean, they finish Tomb Raider and they're like, woohoo, and Alex says, I'm taking off 2 months and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And I'm like, oh, I've got 5 other things that are due like in the next 3 weeks. Because you're basically juggling. And, when you have a big deadline, like a crunch for a milestone, and I've got to work on Tomb Raider, then the other projects are getting neglected, but I kind of push them back and forth. Actually,
Right.
I was working on, hold on, what was it?
A lot of time management.
I was working on Dead Space 3 and I think it was Tomb Raider at the same time. I think those timelines work out. So
Dead Space 2 is
twice they had milestones that were on the exact same date.
Oh, wow.
And it was a crunch for both games on the exact same date, the deadlines, twice.
Jeez.
So I would literally get up in the morning and work on Dead Space 3 until like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I would work on Tomb Raider from like 1 until 7 at night, and
Oh
then
my
I would go
God.
to bed. And I realized after the fact that there was some, whatever themes, I don't remember, for Dead Space. There was like a bad guy theme for Dead Space, I guess. That had a tritone in it and like a minor 9 or something.
Yeah.
And there was a bad guy theme in Tomb Raider that also had like a minor 9 and then a tritone. And for an entire day, I swapped the themes between the two games accidentally. And, no one ever caught it.
Right.
No one ever knew, except I remembered. Like a week later, I was like, wait a minute. That's in the, oh well. And it's totally fine. But
That's awesome.
that's how I end up handling crunch, is I accidentally cross-pollinate themes between opposing franchises.
You never cross the streams. Yeah, we had one of our old instructors, alumni instructors, friend, teacher. He works at Crystal Dynamics now, and so we were like,
Oh, cool.
yeah. So he's working on the what's it called, Avengers game currently, the
Right.
Squeenix Avengers. But it's I personally really want to talk to him, even though he wasn't there for Tomb Raider. I just want to be like, what are they like? What are the dudes like? Is it insane? Like the devs themselves, because he's a audio programmer, I think is his.
Okay.
But yeah, it's so like, I don't know, the whole environment is so interesting to people like us who play the games a lot and make music or teach music, but don't really get to see the inside of the studios necessarily. Like we're friends with the people at Double Fine, and so we see them sometimes, but they're always like so head to the grindstone. Especially recently getting bought
Yeah.
by Microsoft. So it's a very different, I don't know, experience. It feels like.
Yeah, every developer, they've got their subtle differences, but it's usually the biggest difference that I notice, and you would notice this too if you were, a monkey on my back when we go to visit them.
Is
The
that
biggest
same?
differences I notice are the audio rooms.
R-
It's like some companies, the audio guys are out on the floor in cubicles with everybody else, and they have to wear headphones the whole time.
Yeah.
Like that's the sign of like, we need to step up the audio game here a little bit, folks. Other places like Sony or EA, they've got dedicated facilities. Close the door. They've got speakers and everything else. But from a developer's point, that takes a lot of commitment
Right.
financially and physically in the room to put the audio people in spaces with walls and have them soundproofed and acoustically treated and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot easier just to have them throw headphones on.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Again, and yeah, your budgetary restrictions are probably a big part of that. I need to use the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Yeah, this is like, I have a very fond memory of my friend playing this game at his house when Dead Space 1 came out. And I remember being completely freaked out by it. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to play this game by myself. I will enjoy you playing this, but I'm having a really good time. This is...
You're doing a great job. Well, I think maybe it helps a little bit because you're sort of, half your brain is also conversing, so you're not
right?
getting the
you're not
full
like
freak out
really
immersion.
focused. Yeah, you're kind of like, oh well, I got this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super fun. Cause yeah, I was never really a shooter kind of gamer. I was always like into like sports sims, so it's really cool to kind of revisit all the games I kind of missed back then. It's like, oh yeah, you haven't played this? So yeah, this is a really good game.
So is the shopping mall music playing right now? I can't hear it because it's all muted.
Yeah, it is playing. It's kind of quiet on our end. But yeah, did you have?
Oh, that's okay.
Whoa. To say about.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, right.
There you go. Yeah, I wrote all the shopping mall music, so it was very like dun 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 dun. That whole the DAD. It's there,
Yeah.
but it's in a major key, so it's just going da dun 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 dun, like super happy.
Yeah.
And it's the themes. It's all the themes, but it's just like with cheesy, elevator music.
Yeah. So that's one thing I've always been curious about. Do you find it's kind of like hard writing happier like music, like intentionally happy to the point where it's almost like bubblegum? I find that probably pretty difficult. Kids.
I would. Yeah, I know the kids. I know the
Yeah.
track from Dead Space 2 is called "Say Hello to My Little Friends."
But yeah, so how is that? I don't know, because I find I kind of gravitate more towards minor keys. It's kind of hard
Yeah.
for me to write things in major without it sounding like way too cheesy.
Yeah. Super corny.
Right, and before I started doing TV stuff, like a year and a half ago, I was in that exact same boat because I do, you're in C major, right? I'm looking, okay, well, C major, and I can do like Mixolydian, I can do B flat major, and I can do like F major and G major. But as soon as you start, especially like the 4 and the 5, it starts sounding like over happy and over cheesy, right? And I discovered the secret to writing in a major key but not sounding cheesy is just pretend like you're in a minor key, except just make all the chords major. So you use like E flat major and F major and A flat major and B flat major, and you do these parallel major triads, and it really it makes it sound cool, but still happy. It's almost like you have a Picardy third and you're in C minor, but you're just using that E natural in a way. But you totally just scratched my itch because I'm all about the harmony. That's when I start to write something, I'm like, okay, what key am I in? Is it minor? Am I doing Dorian? Is it going to be major? I love stuff like that.
Yeah. So getting a little bit of kind of light mode mixing in there, that's actually kind of a cool way to think about it. I'm actually going to try that. Next time I boot up Logic, I'm just going to be like, all right, I got a major key. I'm going to use it as if it was minor and just use the major chords and see how that works out. 'Cause, yeah, I've always kind of struggled with that and kind of as I got more into like jazz theory, I know that there's a lot of key switching and mode changing and all sorts of craziness, but I noticed that a lot of songs utilize more major keys than like minor keys, especially when you're kind of trying to learn like the 2-5-1, major 2-5-1 kind of, or learning the minor 2-5-1. And just kind of like playing around with triads and different 7 chords is like, this just sounds like a commercial.
Yeah. It sounds like Disney.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely going to try that. That's actually a really new, interesting way of thinking about kind of composing harmony. I'm going to use the bathroom.
Oh, hey. Trade off. So now that he's gone, I didn't have anything for that.
Finally.
Hang on, let me check out my list of interview questions I had here, because I don't remember what I was going to say. Have to refer to the go back to the books. Do you have like a suite of plugins or anything when you're, do you like produce music for yourself ever, like on the side or for fun? Do you have time?
I've never had time.
Yeah, that was what I was.
Yeah, it's like in a perfect world, which is half the time maybe. I'm working Monday through Friday, and I've got weekends off, and I'm not in the studio on the weekends. But when I am in the studio, there are deadlines, and I'm doing whatever needs to be done.
Right.
I think there's a song on Moss at the end of the soundtrack called "Home to Me." That's a vocal song that Maluka sang for me, and I wrote that song just for her. But that is an example of me in the studio with no, doing something for myself, let's say.
Right.
Now, I was writing it as a means of coming up with a melody and some harmonies and, trying out some Dorian stuff for the game, for Moss itself. But I hadn't written anything. I hadn't written the score yet. So the idea was that the song could sort of be the basis of all the motifs and chords and progressions and everything in the score itself. So I did that. I think I spent like just 3 weeks, recording all the instruments and playing everything, getting Maluka to sing, arranging it around her voice, writing all the lyrics. I did the chords first, of course, but that was probably the only example of me getting to do something for myself. And then they ended up using it for some of the trailers, and it's in the game and stuff, and that was completely unintentional. I was honored that they wanted to do it, but it wasn't written for that reason. It was written more for me than for anybody else.
That's awesome. So do you have a favorite set of plugins or software that you like to use?
Well, my bread and butter is basically Sound Toys and FabFilter.
Yes. I love Sound Toys.
Everything that they have. So if I need an effect and if I need color, I'm using Sound Toys, and Decapitator is on everything.
Yep.
Crystallizer is incredible.
Also,
The Echo Boy, of course, I use on everything. Those are the three Sound Toys. But Devil Lock Deluxe is amazing. The Pan Man, all the Sound Toy stuff.
Yeah.
I actually have a question for you, because this is something that I often find myself doing, and I wonder if other...
Yeah.
So, Echo Boy versus Echo Boy Jr. Do you find yourself kind of sticking with... Because for me, I love the sound of Echo Boy, but sometimes I suffer from... I don't know, I'll tweak something forever and kind of get lost in the menus.
Right.
So I find sometimes Echo Boy Jr. using that keeps me from kind of screwing around with the plugin for too long. Do you maybe find yourself, gravitating towards plugins for their simplicity? Or do you just kind of have a really good...
self-control.
Self-control, right? You won't just sit there for hours just kind of what does this do? So what's your
there's nothing like a deadline to motivate you to stop messing around. No, I loved Echo Boy, and then when Echo Boy Jr. came out, I looked at it and I was like, meh, and I kept using Echo Boy. But then at some point in time, I pulled up Echo Boy Jr. and that's all I've used for the last probably year and a half now.
Yeah.
Huh.
I find it's
I think because it's so simple.
Yeah. It's just as good in terms of sound.
And,
for
I
the
mean-
most part. Like,
Oh yeah, it sounds great. And probably 99% of the time, like I'm using like it's a synth pulse or something, I will literally pull up Echo Boy Jr., twist the knobs, change the feedback, change the mix, go to the the plex or the space or whatever I want, turn up the distortion knob, and just move on. I don't
Yeah, you're
even
done.
preview it because I know it so well.
Uh-huh.
I know the settings that I want it to have, and I just move on. Same thing with Decapitator. I just turn it on, turn the knob up to 1, maybe roll off a little bit of low end, and I'm gone.
Yeah.
Nice.
See, that's the kind of stuff, like, I teach the Sound Design 201 here, and I always, like, sometimes I like to talk about the process in class in at least the most honest way I can, but sometimes I have to kind of let the process just kind of happen, and sometimes I'll end up with a sound that's completely separate from maybe what we were setting after to make.
Sure.
But the fact that it's so cool, and sometimes it just comes from opening a plugin and being like, oh, well, I'm just going to put these settings that I always do there and see if something cool happens. And sometimes it really works out, and I always get stuff like, so did you know that was going to happen? Like, at a certain point, you kind of have to just tell them, it's like, I'm just relying on a bunch of stuff that I've done like thousands of times before. And eventually you'll get the ear to where you'll hear a sound and you'll put the plugin on, refer to those kind of bread and butter settings, and you have a sound that, is improved vastly. So just, I think that's really interesting to hear you say that you just kind of don't even listen to it and you just know what you want. That's really cool. 'Cause
But I mean, I'm also it's sort of like saying like, oh, I don't have a lot of corrections in my music. Everything's approved, the first version.
Yeah.
I just work really fast is what it comes down to. I do like 3 to 4 minutes of music a day, like completely finished.
Yeah.
Damn.
Not because I want to, but because I have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just if I want to have nights off and weekends off, I have to compress my time during the day. And I've tried different things. I've tried doing less music during the day and like working on the weekends or working in the evening, and by the time the following Monday rolls around, I'm completely brain dead and I
Right.
become useless.
Yeah.
So I found, just for me personally, if I work quickly like that and just really knock things
Get it
out,
done.
it enables me to have the evening off and refresh, and I come in the next morning and I do the same thing, and then I have the weekend off. I come back on Monday and I'm ready to go. Otherwise, I just turn into like this zombie, and my production just crawls to a halt.
Does it ever just like so music is subjectively a lot of fun to work on and work in around whatever, but does it ever feel like not fun? Like, do you ever have moments where you're like, I hate this, like I wish I'd been an accountant or something?
Yes, of course. I mean, probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. Now, it's not related to games, but it's still related to music. DC Universe had a show that came out this last summer called Swamp Thing.
Right? Love the comics.
And Brian Tyler scored the pilot, and I did the other 9 episodes.
Okay.
And that's the hardest job I've ever had, because I had to do about 40 minutes of music a week.
Whoa.
Oof.
That's like
A lot.
And honestly, the hard part wasn't doing 40 minutes of music in a week. Like I could get up early and work for 12 hours and still have the evening off. What was hard was doing 40 minutes of music the next week.
Yeah.
And then doing 40 minutes of music the week after that, and doing that for 9 weeks straight.
Ugh.
So by the time episode 8 rolled around, I got the flu,
Oh no.
and I was still working. And that's when I was thinking, maybe I should have been an accountant.
Wow.
That sucks. So when you have deadlines like that, how do you deal with writer's block? Because, there's a lot of times when I'm producing where it's like, oh, I don't feel like it today.
I'll just wait.
Yeah. Or like, this needs to be tweaked, and you're like, you can't finish a song because it's like, oh, this, XYZ reasons.
Um, it's if I'm stuck on something. Now I'm working on, like, if it's TV, I'm working on a certain scene, or if it's a game, I'm working on a certain track. And whatever, maybe I can't figure out where the music needs to go next, like it's ended and I don't know where it should go next. What I'll usually do is just work on something else for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, even if that means I go outside and walk around. But I just leave it alone and then come back to it, or maybe even I work on another cue, like I'm going to start something else. I try not to do that though, because I like to, kind of keep it up and running. I did have that problem with Swamp Thing because I was working Monday through Saturday,
Oh,
and I was having Sunday off.
that sucks.
And literally, I mean, I remember it was like, episode 105 out of 10, and it was Saturday afternoon, and I realized, it was like 1:30, I realized I'd been rewriting the same, like, 20 seconds of music for the last hour and a half. I was like, no, that doesn't work. It needs to go like this. No, that doesn't work. It needs to go like this. And when you're working on something, you can hear it in your head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I just need to put it in, and oh wait, I want to put a little this, and one idea fires another, and you're kind of working off of everything. None of that was happening. And the deadline was like Tuesday or something like that. And I literally, I was scared to death, but I said, that's it. Well, I was scared that I wasn't going to finish it, but I was also so fed up. It was basically like, okay, forget this. I'm turning everything off. I'm taking the rest of the day off, and I'm taking Sunday off. I'm going to start Monday morning. And if I end up having to work for 24 hours straight to make the Tuesday deadline, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I took the rest of Saturday off. I took all of Sunday off. I was in the studio Monday morning, and I popped that scene up and immediately had like 7 different ideas of how to make the scene work.
Yeah.
And it was because I was tired, right?
Yeah.
I was tired mentally. I was tired musically. I was tired physically. So after
fatigue.
that episode, the last 5 episodes, I started taking weekends off no matter what, even if I was behind schedule. Just because for me, that break is what I need to be able to fight writer's block.
It's awesome.
That's definitely inspiring. It's like, yeah, it's gonna be, because I think there was a point in music business class where we were talking about it when I was a student of like the point where you have to making music like a habit, and you don't really have like at least our teacher would say you don't have time to have writer's block. It needs to be like a reflex. And it's just like, I think hearing that is just kind of scary, but it's also like, okay, well, this is kind of the level you need to be at to be a professional in this. So I understand it. But yeah, just hearing like, yeah, for me, it was as important as like taking that break on the weekend, gave me the wherewithal I needed to finish this project. It's kind of nice to hear that instead of like, no, I just powered through it. And I worked through the pain.
Yeah.
Like made a song.
No.
Push through the pain,
yeah,
right?
In my ears. So yeah, that's actually super cool to hear. I'm always really, really like pleasantly surprised by some of the answers and some of the things that we get, because I think like from the outside looking in, I do think
I can
we
see
tend
through
to
you.
think things are a lot more regimented and just really super strict, and I believe there may be some of that, but it does also seem like there's a lot of kind of personal responsibility involved, like, right? Like, yeah.
Especially as like a contractor.
Yeah, like I'm working 7 days a week, but that's because I made that schedule, right? So it's kind of like one of those things where it really is the business of you. That starts to make more and more sense the more we talk about it and the more people we talk to.
Yeah.
Like the work is the work, and as long as you can get it done on time, that's cool. But you're managing yourself. You're probably managing your personal work relationships.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully, like using all of that to give yourself more work, like you mentioned earlier. So yeah, it just seems like there's a lot more personal responsibility involved than maybe even working in office jobs. You've got this kind of team aspect. You've got a boss that you're answering to,
right,
who's directing something new every week. It's kind of interesting.
You're your own boss.
Yeah, you're your own boss, right? for the most part until those.
Yeah,
revisions
for better
come
or
in.
for worse.
Yeah, right. It's like
Yeah.
till they hit you with the make it less spooky and more tense, and then you gotta figure out like,
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah, you know. So stuff like that is like super cool to hear. Always.
Do you ever have those moments when you're taking
I
direction?
definitely. Go ahead.
So, do you ever have those moments when you're taking direction when you're like, someone's like, "Oh, I need this to be less spoopy and more like frightening." It's like, these adjectives are just words. What are you saying?
Yes, especially if I'm dealing with someone who I actually enjoy talking about music from an emotional standpoint,
Right.
rather than a musical standpoint.
Fair.
You know, the violins need to be more staccato or whatever. I like, you know, it needs to seem less anxious. But a lot of times I'll get comments like, not even feedback, something that hasn't even started yet, and they'll just say, "This needs to sound more internal." I'm like, what does that mean? Internal.
Just gonna put one big long
I don't-
drone.
I know, just what, like, you know, or like heightened suspense, and a lot of times that means one big long drone, like
Yeah.
just like one thing getting louder and louder and louder. That's heightened suspense. You know, it's subjective to a certain extent, but I've found, you know, going back talking about kind of being your own boss and scheduling your own things. I'm sort of on a regimented, like 30 seconds of music an hour. That's what I need to produce. And I've got a clock. So if I were looking at my workstation, which is here, if I'm looking at my workstation straight ahead, I've got a clock right over here, and I'm constantly glancing at the clock, like working backwards, like, okay, I've got 18 minutes left and I'm 50, okay, because when that 30 minutes is up, for that 30 seconds, I've pretty much done as much as I can, and I'm moving on to the next 30 minutes. You know, I would love to spend 4 hours on that 30 seconds.
Right.
But it's like, okay, pull up FabFilter, Simplon, and automate this, and then put an LFO on the thing, and then, okay, that's good. Now, moving on. It's like, you know, just constantly, like, until the end of the day, and then it's just...
Okay, cool. That's also very, very nice to hear as well, because I'm like... I always tell students, it's like, you want to get to the point where like you're not thinking too much about stuff, and I can imagine for you, like it might feel like you're on autopilot in the moment, but there's so many thoughts that are being processed like at any given time. Like, yeah, by the end of the day, I totally get that kind of like, you know, you've been making all these little micro decisions with every little thing, and you're just like, oh man, I'm tired.
Does that not give you anxiety? Like,
Yeah, right? It's like, are you not like? And then you're drinking coffee, maybe, probably before, like just. Like,
and taking a
holy
lot of
crap,
caffeine.
right? So that's also super
Yeah,
funny because
definitely.
like, yeah, I definitely like feel like my process is like that. Like, I'll be up like maybe doing an example for the class and like trying to make some cool sound, and like on the surface, he's nervous, but he looks calm and ready. I had to drop that in. But like on the surface, you know, I'm chill, but like in your head, there's all these like thoughts. Like, what if I can put this here? Maybe a flanger would sound good here. No, we'll just put the phaser on it, right? And then you're done, and you're just like, wow, I thought about a lot.
Especially if
So
something
short.
doesn't work when you're like trying to give an example of something in class, and you're like, all right, and now when I do this, and like,
Yeah.
shit.
No.
You actually have to go and like, oh, I forgot to turn my effects rack on or whatever.
Yeah, so I find that really funny that it seems like, at least for you, you know, that it's
Well,
kind of like
you know, there's also, speaking of things not working, a lot of times I could probably sit and I'm clicking on things and editing notes and doing MIDI data and doing all this stuff, but I won't play any music for 15 minutes because I'm adding things and moving them around, and then I go to listen to it, and in my head I know what it's going to sound like, and there's no one around. But if I hit play and it ends up not sounding cool or not doing what I want, or maybe I've finished something like that 30 seconds of music and I go back and listen to it again and it just doesn't work, then I've got like an hour and a half of I'm so horrible. I don't know what I'm doing.
No.
What did I
I'm just
do?
gonna have to email them and tell them that I can't do this. Like they
Yeah.
need to find another composer because obviously this is not going to work. A lot of times that's like beginning of the gig
Yeah.
kinds of stuff. You know,
Yeah.
before the Far Cry Primal happened all the time.
Yeah.
Like before I had maybe the first hour of music under my belt because it was all live and I'm literally like rubbing two bricks together and recording it. I'm thinking, this is they're gonna fire me any second.
Right?
They're gonna come in here and tell you to get out.
Right? Sir, that's not
Yep.
what we asked for.
Put down the bricks, step away from the microphone.
So we have one of our interns who's like he's really into Foley and sampling, and he makes what I like to call whatever the opposite of ASMR is. I don't even know what that would be called, but it's like it's real weird, but it's cool. What's like the strangest thing you've used to, you know? You said you were rubbing two bricks together. Are there ever like any other stories of weird stuff you've had to do to get a sound or to?
Well, I think probably recording a bucket of dirt with like a $7,000 microphone.
Wait, did you do anything to the dirt, or was it just dirt?
Oh no, man! It was just dirt, and I put my 149 on it, and that was for Far Cry Primal. But actually, probably the best story I have of like accidental sounds
Yeah.
was I was working on what was the game called? I'll remember in a second, but it was a very sound designy game. So I had all these guitar pedals out because I was also doing a film at the time where I was playing a lot of electric guitar. So I mean, I had a rig with like amps and like 20 different pedals, and I remembered I wanted to record a gong, just tapping on a gong. So I had a microphone open, and I was going to be tapping on the gong, and the patch bay had been patched to record the guitar instead of the mic. And I was sitting in my chair,
Oh.
and I just pushed backwards on my chair to go over to the gong, but I had my headphones on, and in the chair, the chair went and like rolled, but it was going through the microphone, patched into my guitar, which had like, I mean, it had like two different delays and a reverb and like the Pog thing that was doing these different like octaves things, and it made this like it's like this super cool sound. And I ended up doing about half the score that way, running it through all the guitar pedals.
That's tight.
And it was just a happy accident more
Yeah.
than anything
See,
else.
I was actually just talking with one of our students about using guitar pedals as like kind of a cheap way to, because he's really into like modular synthesis and stuff right now, and I'm like, hey man,
Oh yeah, sure.
Outboard
you know,
effects.
Instead of investing in all these modules, you can use guitar pedals. They're just as good and cheap. If you're not getting the electro-harmonic stuff.
Yeah, the Pog.
Right, the Pog. It was like the first thing I pulled up was the Pog. But yeah, that's really cool to hear that you kind of came up with a good portion of that score just kind of using guitar effect, which I think are like I don't want to say a secret weapon because I feel like lots of people do utilize it.
Well, yeah, guitar players.
Yeah, but when you tell someone like, hey man, like you can actually outboard all your effects and use
Pedals.
stomp boxes and guitar pedals to kind of outboard process everything you have. And
Yeah.
you're just like, what? It's like, yeah, it's just like using, I guess, an analog, processing unit.
Well, it's funny because the
Evolve.
Evolve.
The game was
Oh.
Evolve.
I remember that game. It's like it's funny because like I was doing research for Doom 2016. So doing research on Mick Gordon and his process, and he said a lot of the stuff he does is just literally passing sine waves through a crap load of gear until you get like this weird, getting all the character from all your gear. I see you have what looks like a bunch of guitar pedals behind you, but it's kind of hard to tell in this camera angle.
Yeah, that's like a third of them. Those are all the distortion pedals. And then there's an Eventide space at the end.
Nice.
Oh, and an Infinite Jets as well. But
You
could
have it.
talk about guitar pedals forever.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean,
Infinite Jets is
I've been talking about that plugin for like, or not plugin, but that pedal for like a year and a half now. Like, just every time.
I just wish it was stereo, but that's
It's not stereo.
it's fine.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. And
Yeah.
hype suppressed.
You feel a
I
little better
can-
about not having it.
Yeah, I feel like I can like stave off a couple more months of saving money. Now
Oh no, man! You put Echo Boy Jr. on that thing with the ping pong auto stereo.
Yeah, right. That's your
Ooh.
stereo. Right.
I do love the Sound Toys stuff. We preach Sound Toys to our students all the time.
You will buy it. Or else.
Yeah, exactly. Here is the EDU discount. Do us proud.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Um,
It's amazing.
Yeah. So it's about that time. I'm going to get to a save point here soon, I think. I hope. I don't remember, actually. I haven't played this game in a little while, even though it's top 5 of all time, probably, at least for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I forget all this stuff.
Anything you can talk about?
Yeah, anything that won't get you NDA'd and buried under the ground of the studio.
You know, I'm NDA'd up to my eyeballs.
Yeah.
So yeah, So I did only games. I went after only games for a really long time, but I had 2 different periods where all the games I was working on were either like put on hold or a couple of them got canceled, and I ended up kind of standing around for like a half year going, well,
Now what?
I know I've got work coming, but what am I supposed to do now?
Right.
So that's why I started doing more trailers and TV a couple of years ago. And
Cool.
that's kind of what I'm juggling at the moment. I've got 3 different games actively doing music for, plus 3 different television shows,
Jeez.
and a couple of different like library trailer albums. So it's, you know, lots of juggling.
Yeah.
I can't talk about the games, but I can talk about the TV shows.
Cool.
Sort of, because they're, you know, releasing as we speak.
Right.
There's a show called Project Blue Book.
Project
It's on the History Channel, I think.
Okay.
It's like a 50s sci-fi kind of X-Files thing.
Oh, nice.
And then 2 shows that I'm on a team of people with, Magnum PI and Hawaii Five-0, because they have like, it's like the Swamp Thing schedule. It's 40 minutes of music a week,
Oh, jeez.
which
You're
is just ridiculous.
busy.
So there's 5 of us doing the music for that.
I didn't even know that Magnum PI was back.
Yeah.
It's funny because we were just talking to Gary, and that was like his original thing.
I know. I was talking to him at GDC last year. He's like, "You're doing what?" I was like, "The original one." Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Gary's super awesome.
So are you going to be at GDC again this coming year?
Of course, yeah. I'm doing a talk on what's it called? I think it's called "Fascinating Rhythm: Bending the Power of Groove to Your Will."
Neat. That's awesome.
So that'll be fun.
Cool. Well, you'll be close to us, so we'd love to host you if you're around. Switch.
Yeah, just let's keep in touch,
Yeah.
because usually when I'm for GDC, I'm kind of there for the week.
Cool.
Oh wow, nice.
Awesome.
Cool, man.
Yeah, we have plenty of restaurant recommendations and whatnot for you as well.
We eat food.
So once again, we really appreciate you coming on the stream and talking to us about, you know, all things game related and audio related. For all you people out there watching, get Man of Medan, play Dead Space, all 3 of them. Just do it. Don't ask questions. Just do it. It's worth it. Do you have like any socials or anything you wanted to plug, or you kind of just studio hermit?
You know, I've been embarrassingly non-social, and I just, like, earlier this week, am trying really hard to make a point to be a little more active. So I've got an Instagram, I think it's just Jason Graves Music,
Cool.
Cool.
and I've got Twitter, which is JG Music. Those are the 2 that I usually post on the most. Facebook, not so much a fan anymore.
Yeah.
I've been on there for like a year and a half.
Yeah, I think Facebook there's a mass exodus.
Yeah, it's like, we don't really need that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Instagram and Twitter, definitely.
Cool. All right. Well,
Well, YouTube too. So
YouTube.
I've got,
Oh.
YouTube. Tons of stuff on YouTube under Audio Arc is like the channel name, but if you just Googled my name, I'm posting all the Swamp Thing scores that I did. I did the first one last week.
Oh wow.
Nice.
The second episode of Swamp Thing, and then tomorrow the third episode. It's like all 38 or 40 minutes just on one long stream, so
Huh.
people can listen to it if they want to.
Sweet. That's
That's
awesome.
actually super cool.
Yeah.
Check that out.
Cool. All right. Well, we really appreciate having you, everybody. Thank you for watching. All you people in the future watching the VOD, enjoy.
Right?
And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Coming up. All right.
All right.
Have a good evening.
Have a good one.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.
That's always an awkward like goodbye. Goodbye.
All right. Later. All right. Cool.
So yeah, always
Always
super cool. Thanks for watching.
don't be dicks.
Yeah, that's the moral of the story. Every time. Thank you. We've been Paramount TV. Don't be a dick. Bye.